In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii in a thick layer of ashes. Not a good omen for the decade ahead. But first we visit the Maya in Central America. Also in the Americas, we see the rise of the Moche and the fall of Chirippa on the shores of Lake Titicaca. Because of Central America's unique geography, an enormous diversity of natural conditions can be found in a relatively small area. There are mountain ranges and volcanoes, high plains, and hot humid lowlands. As a result, the biodiversity in this region is among the highest in the world. The greatest of the Mayan kingdoms remained hidden in the vast forests for many centuries. Currently, more than 400 ancient cities have been discovered, connected by an extensive network of roads. In sciences such as astronomy and mathematics, the Maya were highly advanced. They developed the concept of zero, for instance, long before it was widely used. For the Maya, as an agricultural civilization, their calendars were of sacred importance. The long count is a calendar, formed by combining the two calendars that were in use into a third calendar. This calendar has a starting point, going all the way back to 3314 BC. The oldest known structure of the Maya, and also the largest, is known as Aquada Phoenix and was built around 1000 to 800 BC. Some 60 miles to the east from there, one of the largest pyramids in the world can be found, at a place called El Mirador, or Viewpoint. This city is thought to have flourished from around 600 BC onward. At the end of the 1st century, a number of cities, among which El Mirador, seem to have been temporarily abandoned. What terrible fate struck these cities is still an unsolved mystery. During this same period, Tikal grew into one of the largest Mayan cities, apparently taking advantage of the situation. Construction in Tikal on a large scale dates back to 400 BC, while agriculture took place as early as 1000 BC. The Maya themselves called the city Yaxmutal, place of whispers. A breathtaking place it certainly is. The various Maya languages were spoken by several million people. Mayan society was organized into different polities and nations, each of which produced and traded their own agricultural and artisanal products. Cocoa beans could be used as currency. To this day, each village has its own, typical fabrics. The ruling families resided in the centers of the large cities that were home to 10,000s of citizens. A strong middle class of priests, merchants, and artists surrounded the king or queen. They may well have been recognizable by their own way of deforming their skulls. Military strength must have been of great importance as well. A high-status captive might sometimes be needed for bloodletting rituals or perhaps human sacrifices. It's hard to say how widespread these practices really were, as so little knowledge has been preserved. Shamanism is considered to be at the root of Mayan spirituality. In order to connect to another world, various brews and hallucinogens are available to the practitioner. In addition to your own soul, one can also have a YR, an external soul that often appears as an animal such as a deer, a dog, or a jaguar. This spirit creature plays a vital role. Natural phenomena, such as mountains and caves, are also connections to the gods. At the time, the Maya were the only ones in the Americas with a well-developed writing system. Unfortunately, just 4 codices have survived the onslaught of the Spanish. Only one more book was written afterwards, by anonymous members of the Kidje people, around 1555 AD. This is the Popol Vuh or Book of the Mat, where Mat refers to the council meeting. It tells the history of the Kidje, starting with their own version of the Maya creation story.
First is Thunderbolt Hurricane, second is Youngest Thunderbolt, and third is Sudden Thunderbolt. These three together are Heart of Sky. Then they came together with Sovereign and Quetzal Serpent. Together they conceived light and life. How shall it be sown? When shall there be a dawn for anyone? Who shall be a provider? Who shall be a sustainer? Then the earth was created by them. Merely their word brought about the creation of it. In order to create the earth, they said, Earth. And immediately it was created. Just like a cloud, like a mist was the creation and formation of it.
Then the rivers and forests are created by Heart of the Sky, working with a couple that can manifest themselves as Sovereign and Quetzal Serpent, but also as the Framer and the Shaper, or the Mother and the Father of Sons. In order to properly honor and sustain their creation, they then proceed to create the animals. This plan fails, however, as the animals are not capable of speaking the right words. To solve this problem, the gods decide to create humans. At first these are made out of wood, and populate the world as speaking effigies. But the gods are not satisfied with those statues either, as they lack heart or mind. So those must be removed again, to make way for the creation of real people.
A flood was planned by Heart of Sky, that came down upon the heads of the effigies carved of wood. They were not capable of understanding, and did not speak before their Framer, and their Shaper, their makers, and their creators. Thus they were killed in the flood. There came a great resin down from the sky. And there fell a black rain, a rain that fell both day and night. The small and the great animals came in upon them. Their faces were crushed by the trees and the stones.
In first-century America, there were no large animals such as horses and cattle. Those had become extinct about 10,000 years earlier, most likely due to a comet impact. It's very hard to say, though, whether there is a connection here with Mayan mythology. After all, natural disasters such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions were all too familiar to the Maya as well. In order for corn to grow and produce a nutritious cob, a seed must first be returned to earth. This cycle of birth, death, and resurrection is a recurring theme in the Popol Vuh.
Now sacrifice yourselves. We would see this. Truly it is the desire of our hearts that you dance, said again the lords. Very well then, O Lord, they replied. So then they sacrificed themselves. Hunahpu was sacrificed by Xabalanque. Each of his legs and arms was severed. His head was cut off and placed far away. His heart was dug out and placed on a leaf. Now all these lords of the underworld were drunk at the sight, as Xabalanque went on dancing. Arise, he said, and immediately he was brought back to life again. Now the lords rejoiced greatly.
According to the Popol Vuh, a ball game played an important role in the creation of mankind. The courts built out of stone where this game was played since at least 1000 BC were everywhere, albeit of different sizes. The ball is made of rubber, and played with the hip by two teams consisting of 2 to 6 players. That those players would be regularly sacrificed, as is sometimes asserted, seems rather unlikely though.
Now it was on the path leading to the underworld where they played ball. Thus the lords of Xibalba, 1 Death and 7 Death, heard them. What is happening on the surface of the earth? They are just stomping about and shouting. May they be summoned here therefore. They shall come to play ball and we shall defeat them. Then was the arrival of the messengers of 1 Death and 7 Death. Go you warriors of the council to summon 1 Hunahpu and 7 Hunahpu. Tell them when you arrive. Thus say the lords, they must come, say the lords to you. They must come here to play ball with us that we may be invigorated by them. Truly we are greatly amazed at them. Thus they must come, say the lords. May they bring here their implements, their yokes, their arm protectors, and their rubber ball as well.
On the southern hemisphere, the tropical trade winds blow mainly from the southeast. As the winds are forced upwards by the Andes Mountains, the air cools down and releases its moisture. As a result, the Pacific side is left with very little rainfall. Along the dry Pacific coast we find the Nazca, famous for their Nazca lines. But we'll skip them for now and focus on the lesser-known Moche, a rising star in the region. The Moche built impressive temples, pyramids and other adobe structures. Their skills in metalworking were also among the highest in the world. Trade took place with regions as far away as the Amazon. Their sophisticated irrigation systems allowed the Moche to increase the yields of products such as corn, beans, and cotton. Due to the lack of written records, little can be said with certainty about Moche society. There is a wealth of beautiful pottery though, richly decorated with images of important people, mythological narratives, and everyday life. Burial sites point to a large divide between the upper and lower social classes. At the same time, warfare and human sacrifice seem to have played an important role. Lake Titicaca sits at an altitude of nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. Today, climate change is causing the lake to shrink more and more. But at the time, it must have been a very rich source of fish and other necessities. The inhabitants of Chirippa at the south coast had already developed the cultivation of quinoa as an agricultural crop. At the end of the 1st century though, the ancient Chirippa culture had started to decline, and would soon be succeeded by the better-known Tiwanaku. The Monticulo served as a public ritual space, where ancestors are venerated, and foods are served and possibly stored as well. It was probably in use from about 1500 BC. The platform mount measures 50 by 50 meters and has at least 3 building levels. Similar structures can be found underneath that were deliberately buried, possibly as part of a ritual that included burning. Why this was done remains a mystery. Might the constellations in the sky have shifted a little bit? Or had a new dynasty come to power? In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried both Pompeii and Herculaneum under a thick layer of ashes and rubble. Indeed, in that same year, a new dynasty came to power in Rome. Titus succeeded his father Vespasian to become the second emperor of the Flavian dynasty. But Titus' reign was short-lived as he died in 81 AD. He was then succeeded by his younger brother Domitian. Apparently, this was precisely what Vespasian had wanted to prevent from happening. At least according to Roman writer Suetonius, who speaks rather skeptical of Domitian's capabilities.
At the beginning of his reign, he used to spend hours in seclusion every day, doing nothing but catch flies and stab them with a keenly sharpened stylus. Consequently, when someone once asked whether anyone was in there with Caesar, Vibius Crispus made the witty reply, "Not even a fly."
Before long though, Domitian emerged as an autocratic ruler who interfered with everything. He anointed himself Dominus et Deus, meaning Lord and God, while his wife Domitia was named Augusta. Yet on balance, Suetonius initially judged the new emperor favorably. Finally something was done about corruption, and the concept of bread and games was restricted. at least as far as the free distribution of food was concerned. The organization of games and theater, on the other hand, continued on a grand scale. Expensive building projects, such as his own palace on Palatine Hill, also served to elevate Domitian's prestige. Next to his brother the great Titus, Domitian may well have felt underappreciated. With his military campaigns he aimed to rectify this injustice, but with rather poor results, according to Suetonius anyway.
His campaigns he undertook partly without provocation, and partly of necessity. That against the Chatti was uncalled for, while the one against the Sarmatians was justified by the destruction of a legion with its commander. He made two against the Dacians. The first when Oppius Sabinus, an ex-consul, was defeated, and the second on the overthrow of Cornelius Fuscus, prefect of the Praetorian Guard, to whom he had entrusted the conduct of the war. After several battles of varying success, he celebrated a double triumph over the Chatti and the Dacians. His victories over the Sarmatians he commemorated merely by the offering of a laurel crown to Jupiter of the Capitol.
More and more, Domitian's cruelty and self-glorification gained the upper hand. No one's possessions were safe, from the need to raise funds for his construction projects and military adventures. According to Suetonius, Domitian was deeply hated by the Senate, but popular among the people, for his practical and pragmatic attitude. As for Suetonius, he had very little regard for Domitian's vanity and small-mindedness.
He was so sensitive about his baldness that he regarded it as a personal insult if anyone else was twitted with that defect, in jest or in earnest. Though in a book, On the Care of the Hair, which he published and dedicated to a friend, he wrote the following by way of consolation to the man and himself. Do you not see that I am too tall and comely to look on? And yet the same fate awaits my hair, and I bear with resignation the aging of my locks in youth. Be assured that nothing is more pleasing than beauty, but nothing shorter lived. See you in the next decade.